But then the government came along and decided you people need a council or need a leader. So, one was appointed, and then they formed a tribal government just to sign mineral leases.
Uh-huh.
And that's when, the floodgates were open, and we were just pretty much, at the mercy of the government. And we're supposed to be, all of these activities are supposed to be monitored by U.S. Office of Surface Mining, but they've not done a good job at all. We're still suffering from the all of the. There was, I think, U.S. EPA and Superfund identified at least 1,500 uranium mines all over that weren't even monitored by any agency. There was no oversight by the government. People just went in, started mining, and the Navajo men were never issued protective clothing to go into these mines, and they were never taught the dangers of radioactivity, the mine, and at the end of or the uranium. At the end of the day, they go home and just be with their families, carrying all this dust home. And so as a result, we have, hundreds and thousands of people that have died from cancer, just because, they were mining, and then, of course, they also, some of this, they were also impacted their own family members.
Sure.
And so it's just an ongoing legacy, and we just have not had the proper oversight from these federal agencies. And like with the Peabody mine,
I want to get
on Black Mesa, the government's allowing, the Office of Surface Mining is allowing them to mine on a temporary permit. Temporary permit alleviates Peabody of any environmental damages, any impacts. They just walk away scot-free. And so there has been a surge of Navajo grassroots movement started to happen about 15, 20 years ago, and they're getting stronger, and they're getting more in number. And so we're going, and really, these folks have had to be self-taught. They go and, learn about the impacts themselves. And because our government really doesn't look out for us either, our own tribal government. Because at one time, the royalties, that was about 2/3 of the general funds was coming derived from the coal and oil royalties.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, they're not proactive in really addressing these issues. It's the grassroots, it's the people that have to contend with these issues on a daily basis that are saying, hey, you know what, this is not right. You got, so they're out there, they're getting messages out, just like what I'm doing right now.
Wow, quite a history, very fascinating. This is Bert Cohen. We're talking with Elsa Johnson, director of INA Solutions, trying to find solutions to a lot of the problems that the Navajo Nation has had, thanks to the U.S. government for many years. And I find it fascinating. You were talking earlier about being self-sufficient, being relatively wealthy in terms of, having enough resources and food to get along okay. And here we are, white nation in the 21st century, and guess what? We are not self-sufficient. We are dependent on, resources of other people, of other exploited nations, and we need to learn how to be self-sufficient. And a lack of community, a lack of identity has been a problem for this white nation for a long time, and this is something we have to learn from as well. And oftentimes people talk about, there's many different ways of generating electricity. One is oil, there's coal, and there's nuclear. And I think we shouldn't call it nuclear power so much as uranium power, because that's what it is. It's not without pollution. And I've seen a bit of footage of Indian children sliding down big piles of uranium tailings. The it's milled, it's dug out. I don't know exactly the full process, but sliding down this stuff that's like sand, and it's tremendously radioactive. I don't know if this was on the Navajo land, but certainly the exploitation has been, well, just phenomenal beyond imagination. The we've seen this tradition of the coal companies working hand in glove with with the government, with the alleged regulators. You know, the
Yes,
regulators tend to be more cheerleaders. Um,
yes,
and I wonder about, well, specifically coal as well as uranium. The coal mining is on the Navajo Nation area. How has the water been affected, the hydrologic cycle, and the environmental effects in general from the coal burning?
yeah.
Tell us
Well,
about that.
mhm. There's three coal mines on Navajo, which um, it at one time accounted for over $60 million in royalties and taxes to the tribe, which is 60% of our tribe's total general funds. So that's why it's almost protected, and it's almost like they don't really want to hear about our issues. But as far as the water contamination, the U.S. EPA, Navajo EPA, and the Superfund project, they have a 5-year project which is ending this year, 2012. And they're supposed to identify all of these remaining mines that were never milling sites that were never identified back in the 50s through the 70s and 80s. The studies show that uranium mining, this haphazard, method of mining, contaminated over 55% of the Navajo land and waterways, and so the same way with Peabody mining up on Black Mesa. That's my community, and we have probably the most pristine water source on the south side of, on this side of the Rocky Mountains. It's called the Navajo Aquifer, and this Navajo Aquifer supplies at least 40 Navajo communities with good potable water, and it's probably one of the best tasting waters around, and it doesn't really have to be purified because it's almost so pure. And 40 Navajo communities, we have 110 communities, or like little towns on the Navajo reservation, and 40 of them use the aquifer. They depend on the aquifer. And then all of the Hopi Nation, the Hopi tribe, uses and depends on the aquifer. So there's thousands of families that drink this water. Not to mention the schools and all of the other, a public. It's a public drinking source. And Peabody was allowed by the Office of Surface Mining to use this pristine water to slurry coal from on top of Black Mesa, 272 miles to Laughlin, Nevada, to the Mojave Generating Station for over 20 years. And they were using 4,700 acre-feet of pristine water to slurry coal to get coal to that plant in Nevada from Arizona, from the Navajo Nation. And there's some of these agreements were done when our people weren't well, formally educated,
Right.
and we were given a lot of promises by Peabody, by Navajo Generating Station, which is just sits about 60 miles west of the mine. And of course, those promises were never kept. We were promised electricity and running water, and today, about 20,000 Navajo folks still live without running water or electricity. And so, going back to the Navajo aquifer, it's been, it's being depleted with all the, because U.S. surface mining allowed them to use it for industrial use. And this is potable water. I mean, this is the best drinking water and this is the only drinking water for these communities. And they've allowed Peabody to just, wreak havoc on our water supply. And
so has this? Brother, just sorry to interrupt. So has this slurry affected the environment of the area? Mixing all that coal.
Oh, dust? Definitely, yes. And the slurrying activity, well, it stopped in 2005 because there was an outcry from the local folks. And the same way with the Hopis, they did the same too. Here's what happened, okay? My brother, who used to work out in Illinois, and he would come out and visit, and he was a cowboy, so he would always ride the range, check on the cattle and so on and so forth. And he started noticing these sinkholes forming in the ground, and he was just, he thought maybe, at first he didn't think anything, and then, another time he was out riding, same thing, and then another time these sinkholes were getting longer and longer. So finally, he followed one, and one took him like 10 miles long, and he was really just shocked because he told himself, he's making mental notes, and he said, the first time I was out riding, I didn't see this. Now, it's and then the next few times it was at this distance. Now it's like running into the next community, and so he started questioning. He started researching, and then what he came to terms was the aquifer wasn't recharging. So of course, when the aquifer doesn't recharge, it starts to kind of start sinking, Mm-hmm. And so after that, he really started looking into it, and then he met this former Hopi chairman. He was their tribal leader, and so the two of them decided to go to their council, go to the government, respective governments, and start telling them there's something wrong here. We need to really start looking into the activities of Peabody, and we need to look at the environmental impacts. Up till then, nobody was talking about environmental impacts. No one was talking about health impacts up till then. And so they really pressed their government, and it took my brother at least 3 years going back and forth to the government. To our tribal leaders. They would they closed the door on him because they didn't want to hear what he had to say, because it meant accountability. It meant, having to look at the health impacts and having to listen to, and not rather than enjoying this $60 million royalties, So what he did was he did community education. A lot of these folks do not speak or read English, so he made his own graphs and boards, and he told them, okay, this is where we're at now. Our aquifer was here, now it's declining, and so he's self-taught, and he's self-taught hydrologist. Okay, you have to be,
Sure.
And so with that, 11 communities said no more using the aquifer, the Navajo aquifer, to slurry the coal to Nevada. So he got on his horse and he rode into the Navajo capital with 11 resolutions and put that before the council. This is the wishes of the people. You cannot ignore this. They're saying no, no,